Hello, everyone. I'm Kristian Roberts, Director of Education at the Dallas Opera. I'm here with my fabulous colleague and co-host,
Quo Johnson, Education and Company Culture Manager for the Dallas Opera.
And we're back with another episode of Taking the Stage with Kristian
and Quo.
So today, folks, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. We always have to give a shout out to the Dallas Opera Network, TDO Network, for this platform and this space and allowing us to use our voices for good. Quo, why don't you tell them who we are talking to today and what we will be discussing?
Yes, and I know Kristian has said this before, that we always say that all our guests are special, because all our guests are special. But I am extremely excited to bring to you Charles Chip McNeal, a wonderful educator, wonderful artist, wonderful everything. So Chip, if you will, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes. Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for doing this good work. Thank you for lifting the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And thank you for having the courage to create a space where we can talk honestly and authentically about this work, which is so important in this time. Once again, I'm Charles Tipp McNeal, call me Chip, and I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Community at San Francisco Opera. And I've been at the opera now for 5 years. In fact, we are just about to come up on my 5th year anniversary in 2 weeks. So it's quite an interesting time. So a little bit about me. My work really sits at the intersection of arts, education, and social justice, and it always has. I'm glad that the world has woken up to the importance of culturally responsive teaching, social emotional learning, and healing-informed pedagogies, but I've been doing this work for over 2 decades. I have been in the field working as an artist educator myself, and I spent a lot of time developing the strengths to be a coach and a teacher, because I think the only way this work is going to really have the magnificent sort of resonance that it needs is if we grow exponentially. And so I train teachers, I train teaching artists in these culturally responsive and healing and trauma-informed pedagogies. And it's really exciting. Although my early career was more focused on dance, I have always been a triple threat, and I bring my theater, my music, and my dance all to my work, and I get to do that at the opera because the opera it's so inclusive of these different art forms. I am so proud that I have done this work in isolation in lots of times, but I have a great cohort of people that I work with. I am actually in the final phases of finishing my doctoral dissertation. Thank you. And we can give a shout out to the fact that less than 2% of all people who hold doctorates in America are Black men. So I get this wonderful privilege of entering into this very rare space. And I pursued it, not because I needed credibility or don't have the experience. It's because it gives you credibility in some of these very, very white and esoteric spaces in which if you don't have letters behind your name, people are not really listening. And so it was a way to crystallize my incredible history and my work in this field and create hopefully another opening in which we can have a larger voice and a better seat at the table. And if I can use my privilege and my power to lift up other voices, I want to do that. But my work is cross-disciplinary. It spans working with youth, children, families, like I said, teaching artists, classroom teachers. I worked for Alameda County Office of Education for more than 12 years, training teachers, both pre-service and in-service. I'm lucky that I'm a guest lecturer at both Stanford University and have been at Harvard as well, working in teacher professional development as well as arts education for social justice. And this is all about having a life and a passion that is centered on arts learning, creative inquiry, and the way in which we take our Freirian roots and mix that with our bell hooks and our more contemporary writings and look for the ways in which we can change minds and change hearts. We can lift people up. where we can actually provide the kind of education and the kinds of arts education that not only gives you skills, but also gives you the kind of power and self-efficacy to make you find a way in the world and hopefully create the kind of systemic change that we need. And this is the work that I'm dedicated to, and this is the work that I get to bring forth in this world. And I thank you so much for giving me an opening to share some of my wealth and my knowledge, but at the same time, I'm always a learner. I think somebody said that, you know, we're always a learner. And I think it's part of it is because as people of color, we have to be better than. We have to be better than the average employee. We have to be more superlative than the average employee. But beyond that, we understand, I think, as people of color, that this way of learning and growing is a constant thing because everything in the world is telling us we're not enough. Everything in the world is telling us we're not good enough. Everything in the world has a narrative that reinforces this idea that we are not quite up to the challenge. And I counter that. I counter that narrative. I counter it with great heart and with great spirit and with my continual engagement with my own self-knowledge and the knowledge of the people with whom I want to serve. That was my intro.
That's a whole word.
McNeal. All right,
all right. Then they need to go ahead and give that. They just need to give it on up right now. They just might as well. There's the dissertation right there.
Okay.
We can probably wrap the show at that, but we won't. We have more to talk about.
You can check out.
But I have to tell you, I have heard Chip. I've heard Chip speak, you know, just in rooms and things at conferences. And from the time I didn't get to meet him because we got away from each other, and I have to say that day in the room, the way that you spoke and talked about the responsibility that we have as educators, particularly those of us in arts education, in the arts, where we're dealing so much with what is now called social emotional learning, which we know has to do with human connection and thinking about the human conditioning. The whole emotional intelligence movement now, and the certificates and the degrees that you have to have for that sort of thing right now. And I have to tell you, the first time that I heard about it, my jaw kind of dropped, because as a creative and as an artist and as an educator, I've even told Quo this. She knows this. I've had this conversation with her. I said, we have to have certificates to teach human connection, but it's vital.
Yes.
It has to happen now. It's vital. And so, Chip, I want to ask you something, because, you know, you have this job that is twofold, essentially. So you have this job that is in the community in doing education work with schools, teachers, community work, right? And then you have this other side of your job that has the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, diversity and equity, but we know inclusion is rolled into that. So you talked about how it intersects. And I think the first thing I want to do, because I am a director of education myself, is talk about the vital, I want to say the importance of that intersection, particularly when we talk about education.
Yes. You made several really good points. And one of them is the thing that we are trying to do, I think, as a people, as a nation, as a people of color, we're trying to figure out how to address affairs of the heart using our traditional and indigenous wisdom, but speaking to their academic and business language so that they actually understand it. So we're really trying to navigate this very complex pathway of creating common understanding, while we're trying to bring what we know intuitively and indigenously in our DNA about what is love, what is connection, because that is the very thing that has allowed us to survive. Let me tell you, you don't survive as a people through the atrocities. We're not talking about a single event.
Yeah.
We're not talking about some horrific manifestation that happened in one great swoop. We're talking about over 400 years of degradation and oppression and systematic diminishing of an entire people. We didn't come to this country like so many immigrants do, right? First of all, we weren't immigrants.
We were not.
I'm so sorry that textbooks are still, somebody told me the other day, textbooks are still saying that we came as indentured servants. No, we didn't. We came as slaves. And we were stripped of our name, the very thing that they know gave us power, our name, our family, our traditions, they were stripped from us. And so you don't survive that unless you've got a sense of spirit, a sense of soul, a sense of connection, and we're trying to keep that alive as we're trying to speak to these in these halls of power, in these white spaces, in order to try to bring about understanding. And so, as always, W.E. Du Bois said it, and so did Malcolm X. We live in this double consciousness.
Yes.
And I'm so happy to help my white brothers and sisters understand a little bit better about. I have these two masks behind me. I didn't even realize the simile, the metaphor that is there. This double consciousness that we have as Black people in the world, right? How am I going to honor my values, my traditions, my ancestors, and how do I speak in these spaces in the way that people will hear me and manifest? And how do I keep my sense of identity? But to your question, listen, if we don't understand that the role of arts is not just about skill building, it's not just about talent, all those things matter, because the only way we're going to diversify the field of arts is through not a systemic change in the pathway, in the way people are able to progress. We have to have education at the most foundational level. We have to have all of these different strategies that go into play that disrupt the tensions and interrupt these systems of inequity that prevent us from getting lessons, from having access, from being auditioned, from getting the job. All those things happen, and it starts with education, a holistic education. But listen, arts education is about restoring humanity to the learning process.
Yes.
Okay? Arts education is about restoring humanity to the learning process, because you cannot teach about arts education, which inherently is about culture, because art comes from culture, emanates from culture. That's what art is, right? It is the way we see, think, paint, draw, dance, and write about our human experience. So if arts education is about culture, then restoring culture to the paradigm of the learning context is important. Now, the problem so far has been there's only one culture been represented. There's only one culture been represented.
Yeah.
And so our job is, as we enter these spaces, it's not only to understand that paradigm, but to understand that's the very thing we're dismantling. And so these terms of multicultural education, multiliteracy, multidimensionality, transdisciplinarity, this all has to do with the fact that when you teach singing and when you teach a dance, you're teaching a whole lot more than a song and dance. You're teaching a child and a young person to believe in themselves, to see themselves in the world, to value themselves and others who look like them. You're teaching them that their culture has merit, has resonance, has honor, has greatness in it. You are changing the paradigm, and that's why I think not only arts education is important, but this idea of making sure that we are dismantling this system by diverting from the rich white artists who dominate the Western world and infuse that with the kind of cultural connections, cultural underpinning, and social cultural richness that is the diversity of all of the people who are here. And so I'm an advocate, and I struggle to help people understand that arts education is more than I can be creative. It's I can be creative and I can discover who I am and who I am not. I can find love and appreciation, not just tolerance for you, but I can develop a real sense of a cross-cultural understanding through processes that help me develop a unique and a diverse perspective. So I find it essential. I find arts education essential to democracy. That's what I'm leading to. So that's the point that we're at. And unless and until our education system is reflective of those democratic ethics, the very thing they talked about, I mentioned Freire and Bell Hooks, what they're talking about, what they write about is the fact that we actually need to teach to transgress. Teach them about their oppression. Teach our children through the arts about the ways in which these systems have constrained and created constructs that make them feel less than and diminished. And in fact, let them understand the power they have to speak truth to power and to create a new and manifest a new world and a new promise and a new possibility that is bigger than what the world has told them is possible. That's what arts education does.
Yes.
And when we do it well, we change hearts, we change minds, we also change societies, and we create the shift that this world is looking for and needs.
Yes, absolutely,
I'm not
100%.
sure if I answered your question, but
you did answer my question 100%, because here's the thing. and I'll turn it over to Quo, because Quo, we have this conversation all the time. The first thing that I said when we were doing this show, and the premise of this show was, I can think of no other place that is a better example of the inequities and the disservice that those inequities does to a human being, to people, than our education system.
Mm-hmm.
That is only telling part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else's story is an elective.
Mm.
So just to talk about, so can we speak to that a little bit? Because we've had this in our experiences. We've seen this in front of our faces, exactly the thing that Tipp is talking about. We've seen prime examples of this. So I just kind of want to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Now, I hope everybody sees why I am a fan of Chip. To be fans of Chip too. In responding to everything that you just gave us, and then to your question, Kristian, concerning what that looks like in education, it's a matter of being honest about the type of individuals, the type of souls we are wanting to nurture. The type of individuals, the type of souls, the type of minds we are wanting to lead this nation. We are wanting to care for others. We are wanting to support and service, to need from others. We want all those roles together. And being mindful of what it takes in order for you to hold space for someone else within you. And then what it takes in order for you to be willing to accept the space that is held for you within someone else.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
want to ensure that as we look at that, as we look at education, as we look at that gateway to knowledge, and that knowledge is just that gateway to connection, that gateway to possibly understanding, that gateway to possibly learning more about others, we have to be mindful of what that means when the education that is offered is skewed, when the education that is offered only tells part of the story. It's a partial narrative, which we have already said is a lie.
A lie.
So when we miss out on showing the humanity, both what we consider the good and the bad, just the very natural humanity of everyone, of every group. And as educators and as arts educators, it's even more important that we do this, because as Chip has said, it provides us with the ability to reconnect, to reestablish that humanity in how we learn and how we engage with others. But if once again, we are skewing the education that comes through the arts, imagine what you're doing to students who don't see themselves. We already don't see ourselves in history, within or outside of certain contexts, outside of certain roles that have been decided for us. Don't
Assigned.
see ourselves in other disciplines, knowing that those things have taken place because the information has been removed, purposefully removed. And then looking into how we live in our communities, then looking at how we live in our society. And to add that onto the art, the thing that we all have inherently in just existing. There is art in existence, and for that to be skewed according to false narratives, partial narratives, according to biases, according to being complicit and complacent in the arts that we are teaching, according to being comfortable and then choosing our own comfort over the discomfort that is necessary for growth. We have to be mindful of what that does to students and how we get to the point where we are now as adults we love art, art is great, but the nation does not value art.
Well, and I have to,
art is great, and then individuals don't value every artist. We only value certain stories, certain artists, and then we continue to ask as arts organizations, how do we create more diverse audiences? How do we get more diverse people in administration? Right. We have to stop viewing these things as separate segments and then understand that they all intersect, they are all interwoven, just like we as a nation, we are as a country, we as a people, we're all interwoven. So we don't get to separate things and then assume that that separation does not manifest somewhere else down the line.
Well, and it goes back to the subject of individualism and this whole idea of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and focusing on your specialty. And that's your career. Look, you're going to be an accountant, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an artist, and that is what you focus on at all times. Think of nothing else. When in fact, the world does not work that way. It doesn't operate that way. But when you put a child in a school and you are giving them one part of the narrative, and they learn that narrative their entire life, and they go through the school system, and then they go to trade school, go to college, or immediately go to work, you see that translate into the workplace. This is not a mystery. And the thing is that I go back and say again, if it's like that, in the educational system where young minds are being molded. And this is not a knock against teachers. Let me be very clear. Teachers are working their behinds off.
Absolutely.
Okay? Especially right now. Teachers are working their behinds off, and they're having to do, in some cases, 3 jobs. They have to be a CDC expert to sanitize their classroom. They have to teach online and teach in person. Yeah. So, but we see where the inequities lie. But anyway, I went off on a tangent that I dropped that flying over. That's another episode for another day. But my point is, educators. It's fine. Yeah. My point is for this particular subject, when you have that false narrative or that partial narrative being taught along the way, and that's all somebody knows, how can it not translate into the business leaders of today, into the organization, into our hospitals and healthcare system, into our government? Yeah. Exactly. How can that not translate when at the first level of learning that they have outside of the home, the world is built like that.
That's right.
And so it translated, and then we end up with a situation of, well, where's our diversity? And this is what happens. And so I think, Chip, to your point, and I say that, and Lord knows we could go on this subject all day because this is my jam. And that's why I'm glad it's the 3 of us here, because this is my jam here. I say that because in your experiences and in all the things that you've done, Chip, and all the things that you mentioned in your credentials and the things that you studied, I asked you about the importance of that, of it on the base level of education, starting in pre-K and elementary school for a reason, because we know it translates later on in life. But the thing is that it's such a long gap, which is really not, it's about 13 years. It's forgotten. And people just kind of go on. They go, oh, well, that's just the way things are, not knowing that it was a long game in the first place. So I say that to say, you have a role that intersects at your organization now. Shout out to San Francisco Opera, okay? That's right. Love San Francisco. I think the first show I saw there was Showboat before we brought it to Dallas Opera. It was great. It was fantastic. I want to know how that has informed your work now, because I know that, and in your current role, how your knowledge of the education system and what's happening, you talked about a little bit, has informed your role within your organization now and the work you do in your organization and with the community.
Yeah, that is a brilliant question. Thank you for saying that, for asking that question. It's interesting. I was on a panel recently, and I actually said, what the world needs now is someone or some people who are artists, educators, academics, and community facilitators. Yep. Oh, I think I have a little credential. I have a little history in that stuff. Because what happens is when you get one person who has one area of knowledge, one area of expertise, one perspective, it's not enough to deal with a complex system of white supremacy. You can't just take one method. That's why these DEI trainings don't work, right? People like, we did DEI training. We did it one time for 2 hours. How come we're not different? Because that's not enough. That's not enough. You don't become a professional ballet dancer or a professional singer because you took one lesson. Think about it. Think about how these minds are we don't have the rigor and the depth to understand that all of us, especially those who are coming to this with little or no knowledge of the complexity of white supremacy and oppression, it's not gonna happen in one book. I know you read White Fragility. That's not the only book, boo-boo. You need to read another book.
It's a start.
Book number 2, but it's a start. But here's the thing. It's this beautiful thing, this nexus, as you say, this intersectionality of bringing in what I know about how arts, you have to understand how large arts organizations work, right? You got to understand the culture. Where is the hierarchy? Where are the pain points? Where do you know that the gaps of information are going to stop or get stopped? Yes. You have to understand that. Then you have to know your business. You have to know the work of DEI. You have to know the work of community development. But here's the thing that I think that I'm bringing to it, that I want all my brothers and sisters who are doing this work, anybody to do this work, to understand. The reason so much of this hasn't changed, the reason our world and this understanding of the gravity and the severity of this racialized anti-Black world we live in is because we are not taking the pathway to actual transformative change.
Right.
That's it.
Okay? So I'm
Right.
talking about transformation, transformative studies. What does that is a study of what does it take to take someone who has a belief system here and help them see that there's another belief system that is more holistic, that is more loving, that is more growth oriented, and that is more encompassing of their heart and their spirit and their soul and the souls of others. How do you do that? So that's more than a workshop, boo.
Yep.
That's more than one book.
Yep.
It is a process that includes critical dialogue, critical research, critical engagement, action and activity, and you cycle through it again and again.
Yes.
Yes.
And you do it in such a way that you are building strategically on knowledge, information, and understanding. That is how we lead to transformation. And so when you ask me about my work at San Francisco Opera, that is what I'm doing. I'm now fighting these structures because it's very normal when you work in these very, very privileged and very successful a white world, be they business in the arts or not. They have a way of doing things. Well, guess what? Your way of doing things in DEI, equity, and diversity have never worked.
Not gonna work.
So no matter what you do, you're trying to get me to shift what I'm doing so it fits your paradigm, the paradigm which has already failed you.
Yes.
Let me take you on a different journey.
Come on.
Let me take you on a different journey. A journey that, and here's the thing, we call it the window and the mirror, right? The window. I see racism. I see it going on. It doesn't have anything to do with me really, but I see it out there. Let's create some programs, some projects. Let's hire some people and let's create some KPIs. That's the window. The window says create some objectives. Let's go. This is great. We're going to make movement. No, boo. No, my people. No, I'm saying this to any and everybody who's listening. If you think transformation starts outside of you, then you are missing the point. And I hope that any director, any general director, any creative director, artistic director, if y'all listening, listen to this. Starts here.
Yeah.
As I've said in 100 meetings, it is the people.
Yes.
Create the laws, the rules, the policies, and the politics that constrain, diminish, and demean.
Yes.
If you want to change those structures and that larger meta-narrative, you change the hearts and souls of the people. And the hearts and the souls of the people cannot be changed in a 2-hour workshop on Wednesday afternoon.
Or by passing a law.
Or by adding minutes to a meeting that was already scheduled because, you don't have time to really gather to dedicate the time to.
That's right. Right. So I'm bringing creative dialogue and inquiry and acting and theater to the experience of our training. I am adding in the academic facts that I know about how the brain works, how adults learn, how people confront their diminished, their saboteurs and their diminished and unfinished parts of themselves. If we bring the science, the heart, and the skill together, then we will have the transformation that creates change. But it's not easy. I'm dealing with a board of 70 people. I'm dealing with a board of 70 people who have a great diversity of experiences in their very narrow band, but who have a diversity experience. Some understand it right away, and some have no idea what I'm talking about a year in. They have no idea what I'm talking about. And I mean this with love. My job is to figure out how to speak to this person who's already, who wants to be an ally and needs some skills and strategies, and this person who says, I don't know how racism has anything to do with me. And what does Black Lives Matter have to do with opera anyway? Oh, Lord. So those are huge questions. And the question, and I think Quo says it. I think I got this from Quo or somebody. It's like arts organizations are purveyors of the culture. I talked about culture, are purveyors of culture. And if your culture is creating a skewed, limited, or somehow narrow band of what that human experience is, then you're leaving a whole bunch of people out. And on top of that, you've got a kind of unconscious bias, which actually reinforces and perpetuates it in magnificent ways that you can't even encounter. So it starts within, because we're trying to unbound the systems and structures within those who have their unnamed and unacknowledged white privilege, so that they can come to an understanding. You can't create a rule and objective unless you've created one for yourself personally first. Yes. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's it.
You're trying to create a rule and an objective, but you don't even have any personal goals yet.
Yes.
Yes.
It's not going to work. It's
Or
not
we're
going to
wanting
work.
to create objectives and want to create a strategic plan and all these things without even acknowledging the white supremacy culture norms and
Yes.
what that means, and how if we do not acknowledge and if we do not jettison ourselves from them, then we're just folding
That's
those
right.
into any strategies that we have, and then it just continues to perpetuate the system.
Thank you. If we could get anything across of this whole exchange, if that is the thing we can get across, you are trying to apply the norms and cultural norms of white supremacy that you've always used that have never worked to this new paradigm as we're trying to shift the culture, and you need to let go.
Yeah.
You have to let
You
it go.
need to let
You
go.
have to. This is
Well,
going to look and feel completely different. I say it all the time. This is going to look and feel completely different, which means it's going to be uncomfortable. And that is okay. That is necessary, because that means something is moving. And if something is moving, something is shaking loose, that means that we can move some things and we can get somewhere.
That's right. You know, I'm going to go ahead and say this because I wanted to, this was in my heart and bound up in everything we're talking about. For what I just said about you need to let go of some of your cultural norms. That brings me to the point where when we're talking and sharing and presenting, what I think sometimes is missed is that I am a Black man in this mix. I know my job. I know how to do my due diligence. I know the science. I know the bureaucracy. I know the politics of it. But at the same time, I have a sense of me a part of me that is in pain, that is in grief, that is in anxiety, and that is dealing with a lifetime of being followed in Safeway and Walgreens and by the police. You have no idea of the stress that I have to just walk out of my house on a daily basis. So when you see me and you say, oh my God, Chip, oh my God, you know, you're very passionate. I find that diminishing. I find that diminishing because it's two things are happening there. One, you're telling me that you have no tolerance for cultural difference. Two, you're telling me that it's a euphemism saying, you know, you're actually too passionate. What you're really saying is your emotions scare me. Because I'm trying to not be in my emotions and you're having emotions and that's triggering me. That's what so you're saying it's really conveying a lot of information, but guess what? It's really reflective of white fragility. And it's really reflective of a socio-cultural intolerance for difference. So if I couch and speak in a way that is similar to the way you run your white business meetings, and I'm pleasant, and no matter what I tell you about white privilege, I do it in such a graceful way that it's softly accepted, then you find that information is more digestible. How about you look to the message I'm giving you? Why does this man have such passion? What does that passion speak to? And where does it come from? It comes from pain. So I say to you, when you tell us we are well-spoken, when you tell us we are articulate, when you tell us, and that's not even going to the part where you tell us we have great hair, we understand. You don't understand the microaggressions that represents. Because how often do you say to your white counterpart, oh my God, I just love your hair. Just love the way you did that, versus how often you say it to a Black person. And tell me the last time you were in a business meeting and someone spoke to the white male presenter and said, oh my God, you're way too passionate. Tell me the last time that happened. So what happens is, we have all talked about this among us, and this is what's going on among Black leaders and facilitators around the world, is we create our own spaces where we don't have to check ourselves.
Yes.
We create our own spaces where we can be authentically us. I can come from this beautiful, passionate place. It doesn't mean I'm any less centered or any less focused or any less able to have a generative and facilitated conversation with you. What it means is my passion comes from the fact that I am fighting for my life.
That's it.
That's what you're missing.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings me to
I teach it, right?
Yes.
That's all I'm saying.
While I'm answering your questions, when I walk through the door and answer you, and I'm sitting down and talking with you, and I'm answering your questions about current events and what's going on and how do I feel about them, I still had to walk through my door after getting out of my car and being glad that the police car passed me rather than pull me over. And that's not a knock. That's just saying that's the fear. That's what happens. So that's the lived experience. Or I just got followed around in the store, or whatever that is. So I say that because it brings me to the point where we are right now. I want to get to current events because there's been this great awakening, You know, people are starting to see things. We saw, you know, statements coming out. And Quo, will you give us a little background on what happened over the past few weeks? Because you were on the front lines of that.
Yes. And so, in response to people having to witness, many for the first time, the murders, the blatant murders of many different individuals in the Black community, many different human beings. I'm going to say it right there. Many different human beings, regardless of what they looked like, where they come from, what they had in their pocket, blatant murders of these individuals. There's been this global outreach and this global outcry, which is beautiful in its own way, to end racism, to fight for social justice, to fight for racial equity. Many of our arts organizations and our leaders, current leaders in our arts organizations, participated in an entire frenzy in this race to put out statements in solidarity to the Black community. Black Lives Matter is everywhere. There's no place for racism here, and we will do everything we can to make sure that we are fighting against these things. Black Lives Matter. Let's make sure that we uplift Black voices and amplify Black voices and people of color and Black Indigenous people of color. That went on for a very long time. What coupled with that was also, as we call it, this awakening. And then this sudden fear, this sudden regret, this sudden sense of guilt and discomfort that took place with a lot of people who had been ignoring what has been said, what has been shared, what has been documented, what has been recorded for a very long time. And so as that happened, there was this weight that kind of took place for those of us who were having to live it. And now suddenly we're having to shoulder everybody else's tears as well, while people still pretend like they understand the work that's necessary for it, or while people still decide whether or not they're going to fully commit to doing the work necessary to end racial discrimination, to end racial violence, to end racism, and to fight for racial equity. Everybody jumped on these things. Tell me what book to read. I feel bad about this. Can we talk about this? And so there's this additional weight that comes in while I'm fighting for my life and while I'm watching others fight for their lives. Let me hold and make you feel better about the things that you're experiencing as well. The issue is that in a lot of spaces that went on to any Black person in the area, especially in offices, that went on to any person of color within the vicinity without double checking to ensure that those individuals accepted that. As Chip said, these are things that we accept in our profession. We still have boundaries. For myself, these are things that I accept in my profession. But in this great big, we're all gonna fight for it. Everybody was so sad and everybody was gung-ho. And then suddenly we're seeing that those Facebook posts are returning to normal.
Yep.
Those meetings at work are returning to normal. And when I say normal, I mean the ones where people were hurting before, but in silence, trying to make sure that we make it through our jobs, make it through our days, and then having to deal with you're sad on top of it. And now we're going back to, oh, okay, now I'm still trying to make it through my days. The conversation started returning back to normal. And so we're seeing this very telling, very obvious, very blatant lack of understanding, lack of true connection, in which many who felt guilty, who felt sad, who felt wrong, honestly wanted to be absolved of their lack of information, wanted to shake that discomfort. They're uncomfortable, not used to feeling uncomfortable, not in that way. How did I not know? How have you been living like this your entire life? I'm going to talk about it with you, whether you ask me to or not, whether I check in with you or not, for about 2 weeks. And I'm going to go back to my life because, other stuff is going on. That was long, but that is what has been happening. And that's what we've been.
Well, and I wanted you to set it up because, we've had this conversation. We just did an entire show talking about how the energy has faded, how this is not a trending topic. But we gave a shout out to Chip because Chip said something very profound when we had a meeting with him before. Chip, you said it, and that's what kind of got it, because I just kept saying my life and my validity, my right to exist is not a trending topic, and that's sort of what sparked our last show's title and the subject matter. But you had a different way of phrasing it.
I do have a different way of phrasing it. we are not your summer project. And the reason I say that is because what we're dealing with is the phenomenon that is part of a capitalistic culture, one that is bent on commerce and exchange and power and privilege. And our attention span is about as long as the Kardashians keep their makeup on. I'm sorry, I love you though, Kim. But what I'm trying to say is that we understand that it's challenging. We understand that it's difficult, and we understand that you have new learnings to come to understand, my white brothers and sisters. And yet you do not have the capacity to understand what it will take to sustain this work over time.
Mm-hmm.
Because let me explain what white privilege is. This might help. You have the privilege to move on to another topic.
Yes.
Do you understand what white privilege is now? You have the privilege to stop thinking about Black Lives Matter. You have the privilege to go on and go on to your next project and Facebook post and new activity and new adventure. You have the privilege of doing that. I'm gonna be Black tomorrow.
Yep.
We're gonna be Black for the rest of our lives. We didn't come into this, we didn't drop in to a conversation. We've invited you into a dialogue we've been having for hundreds of years. We're inviting you into a protest that has been going on in our hearts and in our souls, unseen by you all this time. You are coming into this, and you're coming into it like you're approaching it like it's a project. Oh, I'm gonna march tomorrow. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Now, I'm not trying to put people down who are doing this good work. Don't get me wrong. What I'm trying to say is you gotta look deep into your heart to find out why you cannot sustain and understand what's necessary to approach this in a deep, critical way it means this. Here's what it means, my brothers and sisters. You've got to change the way you're living your life. You cannot just go back to normal and have this be, because if I've learned one thing in all of this, there is racist and there is anti-racist, because I didn't really understand what that meant was. It means that if you're not working actively to dismantle anti-Black racism, you're complicit. It also means that you've got to figure out what the long term is. Because guess what? I'll guarantee you that half of you are gonna, by September, you'll be on to your next cause. Because this is not pretty. It's not easy. Every one of those conversations is gonna be difficult. Every step of your learning is gonna challenge your thinking and your worldview and your history and the way you've been indoctrinated to not see the privilege and unearned privilege that this world presents to you. And so what I'm trying to say is we are not your summer project. That means get a clue in terms of understanding what it takes to do critical, sustained work that is about changing the way you move through the world for the rest of your life. That's what I'm talking about.
And that's it. That's it, because this is not a temporary thing, and it's been around for so long. But right now, and I take it back to arts organizations, because we all work for arts organizations, and we've devoted our lives to art. And the reason why I say that is because if it's a problem out in society, as beautiful as opera is, we know that you can get caught up in the grace and the beauty of a long legato Puccinian line, and just your breath is just completely taken away. And sometimes we forget that behind that there's something that happened that had to get that show, to get that performance to stage. And a lot of times it's not as beautiful as what's actually being presented. And so this is one of those things that's not as beautiful behind the scene, but it's something we can work through together to do. It just has to be a part of the daily business. The same way you're going to look at a budget, the same way you're going to look at your strategic plan, the same thing you're going to look at your programming, all of those things. This is the same kind of energy that you have to put into this kind of work. So it's because it has happened for far too long. And so it's going to take time to do it. Yes. But we're in a pause right now. We're in a pause. We cannot perform traditionally anymore. We're in a pause, and we have a chance to walk and chew gum at the same time right now. We can figure out how we're going to be after COVID, and at the same time tackle this other pandemic that has been plaguing groups of people in this country for 400 years. Multiple groups. Thank you. And so this is the time to do it. And this is why I say be bold about it, talk about it. Because here's the thing. there's going to be an after COVID. And people are going to be watching. Our children are going to be watching. Our patrons are going to be watching. Our donors are going to be watching. Our communities, everybody is going to be watching. So you have to figure out where you stand and what you want to do and who you want to be. Self-examination. I say it over and over again. This is a time for self-reflection, both personally, professionally, and a organizational self. Time for self-reflection. And so I would encourage that, and Chip, you put it so beautifully that this is not a summer project. This is something that has to be worked on. And Quo knows this because Quo has been implementing work like this at TDO for just about a year now. We're running up on about a year now, and it takes time. So I say that now we could talk all day long, and I'm gonna be respectful of time, but I think Chip actually just gave us a call to action. Yeah. You know, what I don't even need to think, we don't even need to do a call to action, our formal one that we normally do, because I think he just gave us one. And so I want to say this because I always say at the end of the show, I've heard people say to me personally, this seems daunting. You know, how do we do this? You know, this seems like it's going to be a lot of work. It will be. Mm-hmm. But now this is the point where I turn it over to, and Quo or you, Chip, you can talk about the positive notes, the positive things that can come out of this, and the positive things that go along with doing this kind of work, as difficult as it can be. Mm-hmm. So either one of you, go ahead.
I love it. I just want to say something. It's such a, we talked about this drive to create objectives and goals and KPIs and such. And in fact, the systemic change and substantive change happens on such a micro level sometimes, and they add up to big differences. Just the past week, a conversation was taking place among board members, and I had privy to it. I'm actually tearing up a little bit here, because in that exchange, somebody says, well, where are we going to talk about DEI in that meeting? And somebody else responded. Someone said, and then someone else wrote back and they said, well, hey, as we recruit new board members, we have to think about the DEI plan. When are we going to start developing that? Those were just 2 lines in an email. Mm-hmm. But do you understand how deeply, critically important those 2 sentences were? Yeah. It had to do with minds changing, pathways changing, processes changing, methods and comfort level. If I've already gotten in your head enough so that every time you make a decision, you think, what would Chip do? What is the DEI focus? What is the DEI lens on this? That's it. Then I've done my job. And that is what's happening. And what we're realizing, and what I hope that we realize even more than ever, and this is happening because one of the work I'm doing is now trying to form a committee, a board committee, that is comprised of not only board members, but staff members and even community members. This is monumental. Mm-hmm. But what happens is we are coming to understand that we are more than the sum of our parts, and that all of us are smarter than one of us. Yes. And that we need the diversity of innovation, ideas, not only color and age and look. Yes. We need the diversity of walks of life to bring in the true innovation that will make our organizations thrive and become the institutions of tomorrow. I'm seeing it happen on micro levels. I'm seeing it happen on one-on-one interviews and exchanges where I see these epiphanies happening. Nobody can mark this and say it was a KPI and objective, but it is changing the way we work and the way we walk through the world. And I want us to be encouraged by these small possibilities that add up to big and critical and monumental systemic changes.
I think that's wonderful. That's a whole word. Go ahead, Quo.
Positive notes. First, thank you, Chip, so much for sharing, for holding space, for taking up space as we should, and for also sharing what is happening on the journey that you're with. I think so often we don't get to hear what is happening at other organizations. Me being in this work, us being in this work, we know that it's those small incremental kind of tweaks, right? That we know that the work that we're doing matters. We know that the work that we're doing is important, but we know that it is truly effective and it is taking root. When we see those small things, it's like, well, how do we consider this? And I'm so grateful that you shared that, because part of my positive notes and building on that is take heart in that. Take heart that it is not an immediate, I am now pristine and I am ready to do this. It is those ebbs and flows of being able to make mistakes, knowing that we will make mistakes, but then knowing that sometimes we get it right. And we have to fight so that we can continue to be in those moments of we are getting it right. We are centering people. We are centering connection. We are being considerate, that will allow us to keep moving forward in this work. So yes, it is daunting. Yes, it is big, as people learned about Juneteenth for the first time, as we have yet to learn about what truly happened with all of our Native brothers and sisters, our Indigenous brothers and sisters who are already here in sovereign nations. That is coming up as well. But as we go through these stories and as our minds are reshaped, allow that reshaping to center truth, to center grace, to center honesty, to center humility, to center connection in our humanity. Know that it is not impossible. Do not allow anyone to tell you that it is impossible. It is large. It is very complex, yes. But the simple truth is that we need to connect. And as we said before, once we're in that space, it becomes contagious. It truly is contagious. And that, along with your commitment, true commitment, not we're going to treat this like a summer project, not a trending topic, true commitment along with that contagious feeling, and the fact that we have to all do this together. We all have things to unlearn and relearn. As we do these things together, we will get closer to where we need to be. And then we'll have other things to take on. But
I love that. I love that.
Move through this and we will achieve this together. It is not impossible. So small little tweaks that become very big decisions, to the point where you don't even think about it. But you are mindful that we are centering connection. We're centering humans. We're centering humanity, especially when it comes in the arts. We have that obligation. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that same energy and that we're doing it together.
That's right. Hope lives here.
Yeah.
Hope lives here. If we didn't believe this was possible, none of us would be doing this work.
Wouldn't do it.
So we are purveyors of hope and possibilities and potential. Hope lives here.
No, and I have to tell you both, just sitting here right now, it has been an absolute pleasure, Chip. You are amazing. You have become a talent crush of mine since the first day I heard you speak at a conference last year. And I also just want to thank you for your honesty and for your authenticity and for you being so raw and so passionate and compassionate.
Encouraged.
It is just encouraged and just the energy that you bring to this work. And the world is a better place for having you in it. So I thank you for being here, and as usual, Quo, you my girl. And so folks, we thank you for joining us today. Please, as always, if you have questions, please feel free to directly message us, private message us. You can email us. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, of course, YouTube as well, and a TDO network on Dallas Opera's website. Again, thank you, Chip, so much for being here today. And we will catch you all on the next episode. Peace.
We'll see you later.